Welcome, everyone, to Soul Sisters Speak. We've come together here to celebrate International Women's Day 2025. In Marmorant Lake, though, we have it from March 1st to the 8th because one day is not enough. So, what better way than to kick it off with a roundtable chat about this year's theme, Accelerate Action. So first, though, we want to meet all the soul sisters that are here tonight. And I'm going to put it over to Lorraine first, if you could introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Lorraine Bennett. I'm living here in Marmora. My business is called The Point Naturals and Converging Waters Shamanic and Energy Services.
You, Catherine.
I'm Catherine Grace Wagar. I am a Reiki master. I am Studio Grace Jewelry, so I'm the jewelry lady. That's what everybody calls me anyway. I work with gemstones for their healing property, and I wrap them all up pretty so that you can wear them and have your energy all the time. I'm retired, except for the jewelry. That's just what I do. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Joyce.
Hello, everybody. My name's Joyce Anu. I am a certified clinical aromatherapist practitioner and a certified registered reflexologist here in Marmora. Enjoying putting everyone's health in their own hands and educating is what I do. My passion is in my work, and that's clear to see. Right here in Marmora, 5 years ago, I moved here, and I've never turned back. I enjoy talking about health and wellness, and I do a lot more about that in the community. If you have not had a chance to see anything of what I do, it's definitely will be done soon as we encompass what International Women's Day is all about for March 8th.
And what is going on March 8th?
So we are bringing Women in Wellness Marmora Expo. The annual event is going to take place Saturday, March the 8th at the community center that's just above the arena. If you've been to one of the shows in the past, well, it's been on for how many years?
About almost 13 years, I think now.
13 years. So, which is amazing in itself. So as we hear that the town is the mayor will actually declare our and do our ribbon cutting. It's usually the first thing we do here in Marmora. We'll have a ribbon cutting kind of declaring the week as International Women's Week here in Marmora. And you're right, because one day is not enough. So we'll declare the whole week. And then that is going to take place with the ribbon cutting, as I said, Wednesday, March the 5th at the Crescent Care at 2 p.m. So if anybody would like to come out and, be part of that and be witness to it and hear some great stories from other women and share more from the Soul Sisters on that day as well. And then, of course, the Women in Wellness Expo happening will have an abundance of wellness, health and wellness products, services, tips, demonstrations, everything about wellness will be happening on that day.
Well, thank you. We look forward to that. We will all be there. And it's always a great energy day for sure. And I'm Reverend Janice Chrysler of Mindful Journey. I too am from Marmora. I have a number of services under my belt that I offer people. I'm a Reiki master, hypnotherapist. I do spiritual coaching. I do a lot of workshops, and you'll notice there'll be some coming up online and in person. I go to businesses and organizations if they need a speaker or a facilitator for their workshops. I'm there for that as well. I'm also an author of a couple of books, and I do intuitive readings. So we kind of a mixed bag, but for me, it's all one thing with mind, body, spirit work, and I love being with the Soul Sisters. So anyway, so thank you everybody for introducing yourself. So I'm just going to read a little bit here because, like, as I said earlier, I tend to, because I am a speaker and things, I can tend to get off track too. I make this too long. So anyway, some may wonder why we still talk about equal rights as though there is more work to be done in that area. Well, guess what? The reason is simple that we do still need to make sure that the rights we do have don't get lost. And it's not always other countries or religions or workplaces where it's needed, right here in our own communities, in our own country. And right now, there are places that are letting these things slide. So if we're not vigilant, they will slip away right before our eyes. When we forget about the past, we then stop learning from it, and unhealthy patterns can emerge before we know it. So, according to the data from the World Economic Forum, at the rate we are presently going, it will be 2158, which is approximately 5 generations from now, before full gender parity is reached. That's a long time. The theme this year, Accelerate Action, is to encourage us all to take steps to speed up this progress. So, with that in mind, we've got 4 questions, and we're each going to give our ideas on it. And those of you watching, we'd love to hear from you. Put your comments below this or private message us. We'd like to hear what you think of this too. So the first question I'm going to put out there is, do you think it's important to continue bringing awareness to International Women's Day? Why or why not? And Catherine, I'm going to start with you.
Do I think that's important? Absolutely. If you take a look at the history of women's rights and of we're going to pull this into Indigenous rights and religious rights, and women's rights started in 1916, when women, not all over Canada, but in some parts of Canada, actually got the right to vote. Now that was over 100 years ago, and still we're fighting for the same sort of thing. You know, it took them till 1940 to get laws passed throughout all of Canada where all women in all provinces were allowed to vote. The right to own property started in 1884. They didn't settle that one until 1964. This is a long time, girls. The right to earn equal and fair wages started an upheaval in 1953, and women worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, and it became law in 1986. The thing that I found was most interesting was, do you know that I was a non-person when I was born in some jurisdictions in Canada? 1929, they started to, there was a couple of girls, I forget their names right now. They're the Fabulous Five. There was 5 women. 1928, they petitioned the courts to be recognized as persons under the law. Up until then, they weren't. It took till 1986 before all provinces in Canada recognized women as persons under the law. So, you know, I was a non-person in some places in my own country. The Canadian Human Rights Act seemed to kind of clear up all of that. But that wasn't until 1977. I remember in grade 7, it was either grade 7 or 8. Now, I went to a public school in Scarborough. We were all called down to the auditorium, and there was an assembly, and it was one of the women's liberation activists who came in to address our school, and she talked specifically to the girls, and that would have been late 60s. 65 to 67, in there somewhere. She talked to us about women's rights and the unfairness and the subtleties of women's rights. But even then, it didn't really twig that we didn't have them, because up until then, we were raised in the family unit. And within the family unit, it was pretty structured. Mom, dad, dad worked, he was the breadwinner, he did the budget, he did all of the purchasing of the house, and, mom kept the house, and that kind of mentality. And those men from that era have raised my generation. But my generation, from a woman's standpoint, we have evolved through all of the women's rights movements. We've gotten used to the idea that we deserve equal pay for equal work. I remember my uncle, and this would be back in the early 70s, late 60s. And this was the general attitude with the men in that era. The women's liberationists, the women's livers. It was like a bad word. It kind of put you in this screaming Mimi kind of everybody. All these women, they want to wear the pants. And hey, listen, wearing pants. Grade 9. I had to protest to wear pants to school. Well, we didn't actually protest. Well, we did protest. We just, all of the girls all one day decided they were wearing pants, and that was it. And thank goodness our principal didn't say a word after that. We were allowed to wear pants. And he didn't say a word when we burnt our bras out by the football post. One day he didn't say anything about that either. Bless his heart. He was a nice man. Anyways, I guess just that movement has continued, but it hasn't totally caught on through people's mentality. If you take a look at it now, just as an example, one of my daughter's friends, who I call a quasi-daughter, she just got her license as a welder. And a lot of the women are entering the trades right now. But now you're entering a man's world, right? Safety equipment. This girl is a size 1. She's very tiny. Are they getting her equipment that fits her, safety equipment that fits her? No, they are not. She has to try and jerry-rig the safety equipment for herself. Now, is that discrimination? You bet it is. It's that sort of thing that is going on today, and it's that sort of thing that each one of us has the responsibility to call out, to recognize it, and to say, hey, this is wrong. We can't accelerate the laws. The laws are already in place. They are there. They will support us. We can rely on them when we need to, but we need to use them. And we need to recognize when things are not right, when we're being discriminated against, when we are not getting the same pay for the same work, when we're not being treated fairly, and even sexual harassment within the workplace. Our Canadian Forces is a really bad example of that right now, aren't they? Call it out. Walk into the room, walk into the boardroom, walk into the government office, walk into your job, walk into your family as a person, not as a woman, not as a man, as a person. In your own home, be whoever you want to be, but in the workplace and in social interactions such as, say, your church, walk in there as a woman, as a person. It's your responsibility to take that attitude and to lead by example. Accelerate it, because, girls, it's been over 100 years. We've been fighting the same battle. Let's cut that a little short. Let's take everyone, pardon me, Have everyone make it their responsibility instead of just a few, like the Fabulous Five or like any of the women who have been leading the movements. They're few and there's many of them, but when you consider how many women there are in the world, if we all do our part, and not just for ourselves, but for our neighboring sisters, for everyone in the room, do your part, recognize inequities, and say something. Find your voice. Wear a nice piece of soda light right on your throat chakra and just say, this is wrong.
Thank you, Kat.
Go.
Yes.
And that's it.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for the history in there too. And I think that's an important part of remembering International Women's Day for sure. Joyce, I'm going to call on you next because you are our little sister, and it'd be good to get your point of view on all of this from your generation's view.
Thank you. Do I think that it's important to continue to bring awareness to International Women's Day? Absolutely. I mean, there isn't a day that doesn't go by where, for me, it's constantly. I can speak for my generation. Yes, I'm the little sister. I mean, but I think the success of every woman should be the inspiration to another. So, like, if you're going to be, trying to lift up, it doesn't, and age doesn't matter. I mean, oh, we should constantly be, acknowledging what the day is, bringing that day to light, educating. That's another important thing. I think, the more you educate, the better. Because it's like, oh, it's International Women's Day. Isn't every day International Women's Day, right? but to some, they really want to raise that awareness. And I think that this year's theme alone, by accelerating that action, it is continuing to bring that awareness to light. It is continuing to create the actions, and by actions I mean educate, create a support group, have discussions. These are all important things to continue to bring to light for acknowledging and continuing to acknowledge Women's Day. I'm just trying to. I really think it's important. So yes, bringing awareness to International Women's Day. That's the question. The answer is absolutely very important. The more we do it, the better the call to action will become. This is every year. It's an annual. It's international. It's not just here. It's worldwide, right? So we're bringing in cultures. We're bringing in women of all ages, and what are we doing? We are inspiring each other. We're talking about why this day is important. We're encouraging each other, encouraging girls that their voice does matter, encouraging, seniors to continue to share in their stories. And on this day of International Women's Day and every day, I think that's where the importance of it is for me.
Thank you. That's right. Yes, it's international, and every place has different struggles to some degree too. We have it pretty good compared to some other places that are are struggling against so many different things. But yeah, to keep
Right.
that awareness alive. Lorraine, what do you think? Should we keep it going?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think everyone has really touched on some very important aspects of International Women's Day, the importance of continuing to not only have a voice for ourselves, but our comrades, the other women in our lives, the mothers, our daughters, our aunties, our grandmothers. Catherine, you brought up some really interesting points that I'd forgotten about. The simple thing of being able to wear pants to school, yeah, that was great 7, I think. And I remember in grade 8 we had public speaking, and my topic was equal rights, equal opportunities, equal wages. So that, this is from, I'm 66 now, so I would have been about, I'm not sure how old in grade 8, but anyways, just to
13.
show you that, it's a continuous thing that needs to happen so that we don't become complacent with the world throwing some curveballs at us, especially lately. The importance of being able to have a voice, to hold strong for each other, to remember where we came from, thanking those grandmothers and aunties that walked picket lines and protested in the streets so that, we can have some diversity in our lives, have some choices. It hasn't been an easy slog. So the importance of getting together, even just for a day, it's not enough, obviously, but to keep that conversation alive, pass the torch. Joyce with, being a younger woman and having a young daughter growing up in this new day and age. I take a lot of strength from some of the newer attitudes and conversations that I see young people share, and it's refreshing. It just even for, I think I'm understanding a lot of things, but then some young person will just blurt something out and it's like, why do you put up with that? Why do you let him talk to you like that? So it's like, yeah, you're right. Thank you for reminding me of those things. So, I really appreciate the conversation, and I think it's very, very important. Not only are we supporting our little community here, these sisters, our soul sisters, we support each other with our businesses and things that we're going through. Almost daily, we connect, we check in, make sure we're all right. So that's community, and it's a community of women that it has a ripple effect, that's going out to other women in other communities, and we're just sharing and letting women in other parts of the world know you are not alone. Your voice should be heard, and we will stand with you if you need to, if you need us. So, yes, I do believe that it's important to continue bringing awareness to International Women's Day.
Yeah. Well, I agree 100% with that. And I can remember when I should have looked this up. I forget exactly how old International Women's Day is. I think in 2011 they had their 100th um, anniversary, but I'm not 100% sure. Because that was around the time that I think the first Women in Wellness started up shortly after that. Because I was at an event where the speaker was talking. 10? I can't hear you, Joyce.
Oh, sorry, I was muted.
Oh,
International Women's Day was first celebrated in 1911, making it over 100 years
okay. So 2011 would have been its 100th year. When
old.
I was first, that's when the first Women in Wellness in Marmara took place. I was at an event the year before where they said that women should celebrate this. And I remember listening to this and thinking, my God, I lived through half of those years and I never even heard of International Women's Day before because it was never celebrated around here. I never heard of it.
Mhm.
And I felt awful that I didn't know about this. So that's what kind of got me going in it. So I think it's really important that we do talk about it, that we do celebrate it. And it's like everything in our history, we need to know the history, even if some of it's not the nicest. It's so we don't repeat bad patterns again, right? And so I think it's important so that we can let the younger generations know. And I can remember when I turned 18, or the year I was going to be turning 18, my grandmother, who would not have had the right to vote when she was younger, said to me, whatever you do, make sure you go out and vote. And she said, and then she explained how she couldn't vote when she was my age. and that when they did finally get the right to vote, they were expected to vote the same as their husband or their father. It was the man had the say in the household who they voted for. But then she kind of smiled at me and said, but it is a secret ballot. So I have a feeling that maybe she was a little rebellious at times that way. So yeah, I do think it's very important because then we honor the people that have forged the path for us. And it's not always the people that are out in the protest lines and lobbying and things like that. That is all really important, but sometimes it's just maybe that mother who says to her daughter, you don't need to be treated like that. You have a right. You have, and this sort of thing. So we can stand up for equal rights for everybody in our own way. It doesn't always have to be that person out on the street if that's not who you are. I think it starts in the home anyway. So, and I think that starts with honoring International Women's Day. So our next question here is we get to go in the Wayback Machine, and we've kind of touched on a little few things here now too. But can you think back at any time in your personal or business life where you felt or were witness to inequality? And did you feel you had a voice or the right to say anything at that time? Catherine, do you have anything to add to that one, or?
I'm trying to think because I have spent most of my life working for myself.
Hmm.
If we go back to the 10 years that I spent doing clerical work and secretarial work, that was probably the most unequal of all. Because all the clerks and all the clerks and the secretaries were all female, and the bosses were all men, and that's the way it was then.
Yeah.
And we were just happy to have the jobs, right? But we had to do what the men said, and they weren't always right, and they weren't always kind, and they weren't always respectful. But there was always someone who was. I did have a problem with one gentleman who was my boss's boss. And he literally just, I could do no right, and up until he came, I could do no wrong. So I wasn't quite sure what was wrong. I did go above his head and mentioned it, had a talk with one of his bosses. I said, what's going on here? And he was actually fired, so there were things that you can do. I spoke up. I've got a tail wagging in my face here. I spoke up but most women in those days wouldn't have. And it's not that I was braver than any of them. I was just really pissed off. I say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, sometimes you'd feel like you could lose your job.
Well, that's just it. Yeah, and you needed your job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you. Joyce, what about you?
That is one of the, Catherine, that was an amazing experience to share, because not everybody would understand that, at that time, clerical work and being in a business in a corporate setting, you don't realize it, but there is a lot of that. I remember myself holding a position where it was also in a corporate setting in a mostly male dominant industry. We're talking in the automotive industry. And what I did was not something, women can do a little bit more. We find other ways to make things work, and we think usually outside the box. But there was a time where I was kind of, all my ideas, all my hard work, all my presentations, all of that it was acknowledged, but it wasn't quite taken into account, as opposed to somebody else who's possibly sitting on the project team that may have had other ideas and just may not have made sense, but that's the direction it went. And I sat back and I thought, I know what's happening here. Like, to me, I knew what was happening, but I don't think in a boardroom full of others that were mostly, men at the time, they didn't quite, see that I would have, picked up on that. Being that I was in that corporate inequality, that's where I personal experience, I can touch on that as well, because I came to Canada, I'm Lebanese, so I moved here, and bringing that, it was really hard for not only myself but my mom to move here, new language, a lot of that, a lot of the times I would have to translate. Did we get an equal opportunity in some of the activities that I could have joined as a younger girl at school? I didn't get to join horse riding, or I didn't get to join things. So there was a lot of that I experienced as a on a personal level as well. So have I ever experienced it? Yes. Did I feel like I had a voice at the time? No. Well, I was younger, so I didn't know if it was right or it was my place to speak. I was really shy. Had I been empowered, had I been educated, had I been, my mom was very strong. I always looked up to her. She, I just didn't know how to answer at the time. And I thought that if I said something, it would be wrong, or, and that's not fair. So as we move into the new ages and the new dawn, I'd like to continue to educate the younger ones to have a voice, to understand that, that's my passion. That's my passion, is to wholeheartedly continue championing these younger women into becoming, um, full of pride and strength, and embracing their feminism at an early age. And that way they've got that empowerment, and they too would be able to have a voice for themselves. So they're never left in an uncomfortable position where they may feel inequality.
Thank you. Lorraine?
Yeah, thank you. I was very lucky in my work careers, and I've had many, that it was predominantly the businesses I worked for or participated with were run by women. So I give thanks to, I think, those role models that preceded some of these women, that laid the groundwork so that they were able to go into positions of management and owning businesses. And so, when I went to staff meetings and board meetings, it was predominantly women. So I was very lucky in my work life to have been involved with that. I mean, having said that, I do. I was at, it wasn't that long ago that we weren't able to get our own credit cards. So I was a single mom for a while, and I had a colleague, another woman who was also a single mom. We both completed college together. She went to apply for a credit card in her name, and she was not allowed. And this was like the 90s. So that's not that long ago. And so things have changed there. But I know I was very lucky, and that, so the having role models, like Joyce was saying, for the younger generation that are coming, is to be able to, be a voice, be supportive, let them know that they still have a voice, whatever comes their way. I've only personally, the inequity personally has just been instances where being brought up in where women often didn't say anything if someone said something that was an off-color joke or a sexist joke. You would just, oh, okay. But I feel much stronger now in myself, in that if I hear that kind of thing coming from a man, that I will speak up. You know, if anyone's saying anything untowards to another woman or a girl, then I will speak up. So, yeah, I think the inequity part of experiencing that, I think it's just made me stronger in myself, and that I feel that the importance of being able to have a voice and share that, so that others are protected and strengthened that way.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've all at some point we have gone through something like this, and I think it's the learning from it. And I was, as Catherine, you were talking about, you know, the pants thing, and Lorraine and I both shaking our heads, yeah, because and Joyce, you might find that sounds crazy, but that was a big deal. It was like a big win, especially when you're 13, 14 years old to have that. And I was thinking, Catherine, you grew up in a much more liberal school than what I did here. It was very frowned on. I was one of the leaders in getting the girls to wear the pants, and we did not get treated very well as a result of that. We were all taken to the gym. Our principal, our vice principal, had a very bad temper, and he demonstrated it very well in that gym, trying to intimidate us all and scare us by throwing clipboards against the wall, giving us all detentions, and unless we went immediately and changed into a dress. And there was only about three of us that day. We had decided we're not even bringing one. We're wearing pants, right? And anyway, so that didn't go over well, but we did do it. Lessons I learned from that. Not everybody who says that they will follow you or be with you will, because there were some that as soon as they got to school went and changed, because and we were only 13, like, you know, and we did invite the 12-year-olds and stuff too, like, to be involved in this. And then there are those that, yeah, they're behind you until stuff goes south, and then you got the odd one that will be with you. So I decided and learned right there that if I'm going to stand up for something, I have to believe in it and be willing to go the full gamut. So that's the way it was at the school. We got in a lot of trouble over it. Then we had to go home. My mom knew I was doing this, and but she just said, "Don't tell your dad." He was not pleased, but then he realized that he had this crazy daughter who was always going to be saying stuff like this. Um, but I mean, I grew up as well. It was kind of the typical household in the 50s, 60s, is where mom stayed home and dad went to work, and everything was fine that way. But I never had it in my head that I wouldn't be allowed to do anything. We had, as we got older, it was kind of just starting to change there, going into the 70s, where women were taking different types of jobs. But even so, at our school, it wasn't opened up like that. And we certainly would never have had someone talking about equal rights come into our school when I was in grade 8. You didn't talk about any of that kind of stuff. It wasn't talked about, it nothing like that. So it was like a real eye opener when you had to start going there. I remember my first job when I went to get it, my dad said how lucky I was that I was being paid the same as the other people. And I said, why wouldn't I? I'm doing the same job. Like, so I didn't even realize there were different pay structures for different people. And even when I was a manager of a department back in the late 90s, I had went in for an interview, performance review, as you go in for, and I had just found out before that one of the other managers was leaving, so their job was coming up. I didn't want it, but I inquired as to how much they got paid, because none of us knew how much everybody got paid, right? And I found out he made a lot more than I did. And so when I got in for my job performance, I asked him, how come that guy made more money than me? And so he went through all I said, it's not because it's a man if that in that job, is it? No, I had a really good boss, and he got really flustered. He was like the same age as I am. So we're the same kind of generation going through this. And and he says, no, no, it's because of this, and this, the type of work they have to do. And I was able to prove to him that I did that and more in my department. So I should at least get a pay increase. And so anyway, I got one. And so when I went downstairs, the woman working in the other department who did much the same as I did, when you go up there, I said, you demand a pay increase because I think I just got us both one. And she did. So, and but it was just little things like that that you having that confidence to speak up. In that I wasn't afraid of losing my job, but it was kind of interesting to see a boss squirming in their seat because now we're in the time when you have to be careful how you answer things too. Gone were the days when I had one of my first jobs after I was first married. Went for a job interview, and all the questions they asked me, I imagine Lorraine and Catherine, you had the same, is like, are you married? Do you have children? Do you plan to have more? Who's going to look after the kids when you come to work? How are you getting here? Does your husband know that you're applying for this job? What's he feel about it? Well, he'll be happy when the paycheck comes in, I'm sure. But all those things that now, of course, it's illegal to even ask them. They might still think them, but they can't. So, like you said, the laws are there. We just need to make sure that we use them. But back then, the laws weren't there yet. So, in the 1980, when that was brought, equal pay for equal work, I thought, yes, finally. So, there's certainly been experiences, but like you said, Lorraine, we learn from them and we pass those stories on so that the next generation is, a little wiser maybe and know their rights. Um, so I guess I kind of answered, for me, I already answered the next question. So are there things we could be doing for the younger women at this time? As you think, what kinds of things could we do for them, Catherine? Or
I
are we
think
doing?
simply educate them and celebrate International Women's Day, because it's such a wonderful time to bring to the forefront what has the inequalities that have existed over the years, because some of them being raised right now, any woman, any girl being raised right now thinks that all of this is a perfect God-given born into it right, which it is. It just wasn't for us, and we had to fight for it. So I think constant reminder of International Women's Day that these are rights, but they were rights that we had to fight for. Remind them that they need to fight for it, raise them to speak up. As I said before, raise them to speak up when they see something not kosher.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not a word I should say, is it? Yeah, no, just encourage them to be fair,
Mm-hmm.
lead by example, right?
Yeah, true. Joyce, what about you? You have a young teenage daughter. What's some advice? There's things that sometimes it's easier looking back, but are there things that we think as a whole we could be doing for the teenage girls and the women in their 20s and such, just kind of going into the workforce and on their own, maybe things we could do for them?
Yeah. Oh, I have a lot of young ones that are young female teenagers around me that are very opinionated. I think that it's the way, as long as you continue to foster, see, for mine specifically, I think that when they were younger, they were like my daughter was very like timid and shy, and I always thought I'm gonna empower her to be have strength and to be strong and to have a voice and to have an opinion, and it backfired. So to help combat and always help, I think it's just hope, inspiration, open dialogue, educating, just collaborate, like, just allow them to understand where this is coming from. And it's not about how we can make a difference so fast, but so long as we instill that and embed that into them, hopefully it doesn't backfire, but as long as we continue to do that, we will see a difference,
Mhm.
and that accelerate action that we're, theming up to this year. I think that's a good way of bringing it to light. So continuing to educate and talk, and that's all.
Lorraine, what about you?
I really appreciate what you've shared, Joyce. Yeah, it's important. I think we lead by example. We often the people that matter the most in our lives are people that we admire by their actions and their words. So paying attention to that. So if we can share that with younger women, and Catherine, you touched on the fact, or I think it was Janice maybe, that had said about taking for granted maybe some of the things that the privileges they have now. It shouldn't be thought of as a privilege, but the rights that they have now came from a lot of work that we did and our mothers and our grandmothers did. But seeing the way the governments are changing, for instance, down in the United States right now, where it's how quickly and how easily all that hard work can be overturned. And
Mm-hmm.
so, in a blink of an eye, that something that you thought was a given right can be taken away. So that it's very important that we support each other, and especially the young women that are observing what's going on right now, so that they feel that they're not alone, that they can ask us questions and ask for our support. I think that's extremely important at this time. And a lot of young people, young women, are showing signs of anxiety more than I ever experienced in the last few years. So I think being that we are in the wellness fields of supporting, Reiki and reflexology and shamanism, is to be able to support these women so that they can get on the other side of this anxiety, and so that they can feel that they have a voice and they have strength. So I believe that we can offer that at this time to those younger women that are coming behind us.
Yeah. Well, it can get overwhelming for anyone. And I think especially when I think back to like in the teens and early 20s, you have a lot of changes going on. You are going from that being a child to being independent. At least we hope they're being going into that stage, right, where they're feeling that to go into that independence. But again, that's why we all voice that celebrating something like independent or International Women's Day is so important, is because it reminds everybody of the what where we were and where we are now, and then where we want to go. Um, and as you mentioned there, things can be taken away so quickly from us, and sometimes in ways that are disguised as something else. And the next thing you know, your right has just vanished. So we need to be mindful. And I think what I'm seeing sometimes with people in general, and it's kind of sad, is that they care only when it affects them personally. They'll be, oh, I don't care if they change that law. I don't care if they bring in this bill. I don't care if that happens because it's not happening to me. And then one day, guess what? There's something that happens to you. And so I think it's to be uh, to show kindness, compassion, understanding, even though if it doesn't affect us directly. Um, and I think if the young people will grow up with that as well, and you have that support system that you're giving to other people and they're going to give back to you. So, and yes, listen, I wish, well, my grandma passed when after I turned 18, but there was likely lots of stories she could have told me. And for someone who grew up in the early 1900s, she and her sister bought a house, which was not easy for them to do. Um, and so she had her own business. She was a seamstress and this sort of thing. And she said she was, late getting married. It was until she was 26. And I suppose everybody thought she was going to be an old maid. But then her husband passed away when she was like about 50. So she had responsibilities then too. And I thought I just understood that, but I didn't really until I got older thinking how hard it would be, especially when you weren't a person, you couldn't own property, you couldn't vote, you couldn't do all these things, and to kind of work through all of that, so kudos to all those ladies who did so in their own way, that were strong women and gave that example to us. So I think if we can set that example, then hopefully, you know, and they'll learn. And part of growing up too, though, is to learn when to speak up and when to be quiet. So there's always hope. That I'm still working on that one. Okay, so our last question is, can you see how equal rights for women are then passed down to everyone? When we talk about International Women's Day, is it really just about women, or is it, spread out, trickled out into other areas? Catherine, what do you think?
Canadian Human Rights Act in 1977. It was not just for women. It was for people of color, people from different races, that they could all be free from discrimination. So this movement for women's rights got a lot of other rights, a lot of other people included into it, so that now we're all persons.
Mm-hmm.
We are not segregated or victims of discrimination, and we have a leg to stand on. So yeah, the women's movement has simply gathered all the underdogs,
Mm-hmm.
pulled them all together, and made fairness from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Joyce, what do you think? Do you think it just affects women, or has it expanded?
Well, I think, well, as a mom, and I think that I did a interview a little while ago where I explained that there's many patriarchal challenges that are created. And these roles, I think, if I remember it correctly, were in a household. And I thought to myself, like, I have a daughter, but I also have a son,
Mm-hmm.
right? So in my household, it's myself, my husband, my daughter, my son. And is it my responsibility to do the cleaning, to do the dishes, to do the laundry? Is it my responsibility to do these things? Or even addressing topics like menstruation for that matter, right? And childbearing, right?
Yeah.
Like so, but I don't think these are conversations that we should only be having with our daughters. I think these are conversations that we should be having with our boys as well.
Yes.
And and it's important to talk about feelings.
Mhm.
Feelings, it's like, no, sorry, men have this thing where it's important to encourage them to feel, because then they feel the pain, they feel hurt, they feel joy, and it's okay to feel these things. And I think that's very important to acknowledge that, and it goes far beyond just passing it down to our daughters or mothers or grandmothers. They've all passed it down to myself, but I feel that it's important to also pass it down to my son, and so that he understands too that that it's okay to feel these pain, um and cry, right?
Mhm. For sure. That's a very good point, Joyce. Lorraine, what do you have to add to that?
Oh, I love what you shared, Joyce. And it really is important. You hear often a backlash that men feel threatened in some way when women are empowered, which really isn't the case, but that's just the language that has been encouraged over the years. So having, our future generations, raising our daughters and our sons using the same language, allowing them to have emotions, to feel, to work through things um, on a pretty equal platform, using the proper names for body parts, which we often didn't do when we were young. We said referred to our vaginas as down there sort of thing. So, just being able to normalize language so that everybody's, sharing with that and moving forward. And, you were talking about the patriarchal society, it's a lot of great history was ruled by women and a matriarch. They were the ones that made the plans, were the healers, looked after the community. They were the ones that people went to when they needed answers and before they made a quest. So, and that wasn't a threatening thing. It was just something that happened over time. So, I really appreciate, Joyce, that with people like yourselves and your generation and us, or us older ladies that are perhaps grandmothers as well, just those conversations now that we can have with younger people and respecting what we've worked towards. So I really appreciate that, and I believe all those things can be passed down, and the work isn't over, and that's why we need International Women's Week.
Exactly. Yeah.
All the
Here.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I agree 100% too. It's not just about empowering the women. It's to teach the boys as well. And actually it's comes down to let's just teach them about being compassionate, about being kind. And just because you don't feel this way or react this way, that doesn't mean that that person over there, you know, isn't justified in how they feel and how they act, as long as they're not hurting someone else and all of these sorts of things. And yes, there's still areas that need work, and I'm not going to pick on anyone, but I can remember back when I can remember how it became a big deal that women were allowed to be ministers, and there are still some religious groups where it's not allowed. You can do the dinners and you can do the cleaning and you can even be on a board, but you can't be the minister. So, and I remember thinking, well, they're making a big deal. Why couldn't I? Didn't know that they couldn't be until it was made a big deal that, oh my God, they got a female minister. And I thought, well, what's so all weird about that? My mom knows how to read the Bible and say prayers and, this sort of thing. But so there's areas that those sorts of things still need to be addressed because it is kind of conflicting. You've got one part of your life that's very important, but is treating you one way, yet talking about equal rights. So it is kind of a mixed bag, but I think those conversations too at home are extremely important. That's where they need to start. And yeah, as parents, as grandparents, and just a passerby, if they come to us to talk, sometimes it's easier. Yeah, and I do think that it's yeah, the rights weren't just for women. It started out maybe that way, but not so much even. They wanted the fairness in the workplace. They wanted working hours that were regulated. They didn't want kids in there working. And so that wasn't, it didn't end up being just for the women. It was also for the children. It was also for the other people that came on after them. So we're the trailblazers and sometimes don't even know it. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add tonight before we close up our conversation? Now everybody's
I
quiet.
think we've all done such a great job. I love when we do our Crohn's of consciousness. It's just so much information, so
Yeah.
much that, like, how can you not want to just absorb that all?
Mm-hmm.
I can sit here maybe for and still keep talking. I, I enjoy sitting with my soul sisters. I strongly believe, like, just the empowerment that comes from being with other women. I think just get out there and find two find two women this week and sit there and share stories together with them, and you will never feel it's like having a cup of tea with your favorite girlfriend. That
Mm-hmm.
is how you will leave feeling, because what happens when you get together with one, two, three, four, a group of women, it's it's magical. It's amazing. So I always say that my value that I get from this group is that you're, I always go to, I call my elders my wise owls, because that is exactly what I'm doing, is that I'm learning and I'm taking all that information and I'm retaining it from those that have been there, done that, seen things before I did, or maybe see them with bigger, brighter eyes. But I just think that anyone older than me, I think that's important. And that's what I've always done. It helps me align my values, my core values, and keeps me in line as well.
Well, I think you made a good point there too, that what I'm going to bring up as crones, which is a good thing, and you are still the mother, um, uh, is that not to be closed-minded and think that we have all the answers. And because we don't, there's still a lot that each one of us is learning, and we have so much to learn from younger people as well to explain to us what they're going through in workplaces and stuff. And it's also that, there are some areas, I'll be very honest, in my life that I'm thinking, you know what? I was there, I did that, I held the picket sign, I walked the walk. I can support you, but I'm not going to do it anymore. There's other areas that I want to press my sights to, but there's always the support there for others doing the battle. And I think people need to feel okay with that, that not everyone is designed or here to be that person out front. And even if you were, it's okay to step back sometime, but still support the people that are doing it. Anyone else? Isn't it amazing how quiet we can become? A shout out to our other sister, Darcel Runciman. She was not able to be here tonight. We do miss you, and her information and contribution to our circle is certainly very meaningful for us all. So, um, anybody wants to learn more about us, I'll be putting our links to our websites and such in the comments below. And better yet, come to International Women's Day celebration, the Women in Wellness Expo in Marmora at 28 Victoria Street, March the 8th from 11 till 5. Lots of people there to see, and there will be door prizes.
And
And
there is an amazing speaker
you get
that
to
we're
hear me
having this
again.
year.
So,
Lorraine did an amazing job last year. I chose Janice this year. And I think I really wanted to choose you because that's where Women in Wellness Expo started.
thank you. And thank you for taking up the torch and carrying it on. So, anyway, everyone have a fabulous week. And like I said, I hope we see you all. And if you can't come to the Women in Wellness Expo, I do hope that you find some way to celebrate International Women's Day wherever you are. Namaste, everybody.
Namaste.